Good morning and welcome. You're with Maree and Marty here with another Media Matters M&M for your M&M on a Wednesday as we record this. But it's going to go out tomorrow, but that's all right. Hello, welcome, Marty.
Morning.
I've got a cold, so I'm a little bit
Have you?
woolly-headed this morning, but that's all right.
Buscke, no.
We're all fired up.
Yeah.
A lot's happened this week.
Yeah, for sure. I finished my fast on Sunday, so I'm very clear-headed.
Very clear-headed, right. Well, let's dive in because our list is long and we've got a lot to talk about. And the first thing that I want to talk about, I actually feel like I need to break into song. You know, I kind of feel like Ellie Campbell is sort of calling me, there's a rat in the kitchen and what you gonna do? There's a rat, I don't know. That's been bouncing around in my head this week. Why do you think that is?
Well, the hantavirus, right? Yeah, another... suddenly 100,000, I think someone counted, news articles suddenly popping up all over the world. It's pushed by the same crisis actor they used to push the COVID shots, and he didn't even bother to change his shirt. He had the same shirt on. He's on the cruise ship, terrified about the hantavirus. And it's a relatively mild disease that's been around for a fair while, but the WHO is... losing support, and apparently I think there's an mRNA vaccine that's miraculously available, and Tedros is telling us how important it is that we fund his corrupt big pharma gateway. But it's hard not to think we've seen this show before, isn't it?
It is. It's like that sort of earworm that you get in your ear, isn't it? And you can't quite get the song out of your head. And yeah, Tedros has been there front and centre. How many news stories did you say?
So someone counted
100,000.
100,000 just suddenly springing up.
Wow. You flicked me an article, which I said to you when we were going to talk about this, and then you admitted that you did not read. You found it. You sent it. I read it. It was fabulous. You've missed out, my friend.
Well, I love David Bell because he's often on Leighton
Dr.
Smith.
David Bell. Yes, and he's often with us too.
Yeah, right.
He's amazing. He's just actually been on with Leighton. I think this was you sent it to me via the Daily Skeptic, but I think it was also originally put in the Brownstone Institute, of which he writes for.
Right.
He says here the WHO estimates that 10,000 to 100,000 hantavirus cases occur every year, spread across the Americas, Europe, Africa, and Asia. The current media coverage and WHO news conferences therefore concern about 1,000th of the cases expected this year. Europe alone gets between 2,000 to 5,000, and none of those cases are newsworthy. But the three on this tiny little Dutch ship, you would have thought that it was the end of the world.
Yeah, I actually watched One News on Monday night, just so we made the show a bit more about media, and it was where was it? I think it was number 3 on in the order, and they're talking about how they're going to fly these Aussies on the ship and a Kiwi, so it's United Nations, everyone's got skin in the game, to a COVID quarantine centre near Perth from Amsterdam. And this site cost $400 million to build, and it's been sitting empty till 2022. And I thought it was telling. The journalist reporting on this said, of course, that is all about to change. What, for 2 people?
Yeah, I know, 2 or 3 people. I watched that story as well, and I think they've only used it, what was it, for bushfire evacuees,
Yeah.
something else. It is just insane. It just shows you the level of financial wastage that Western Australia went through with that facility, and the hype around this. It's almost like they're trying to trigger a fear mechanism. And what I love about the David Bell piece, because he's a clinic and public health physician. He's got a PhD in population health. He's an epidemiologist. He knows his shizzle, does our David, and he's done that deep dive, and he's basically found the information that so many of us are aware of. He's saying a further potential influence, and this is in terms of the WHO, Tedros out there doing his little Gabriel-sing up and down in front of the world's media. A further potential influence is the conflict of interest, though its impact on the current situation is unclear. The WHO's largest donor is now the Gates Foundation, a private operation directed by Bill Gates with a strong history of investment in mRNA vaccine company Moderna. Moderna is working on a hantavirus mRNA vaccine. Stop it! Who would have thunk it? Which is surprising from an investment perspective as the market seems so small. How would a viable commercial market be ensured for a vaccine for such an obscure disease? This viable market requires large swathes of the population to be convinced that they're at far higher risk than they actually are, or coerced into taking it. In the United States, the risk is about 1 case per 10 million per year, with perhaps 1 million to 1 per 100,000 globally, rather.
I
Oh,
read
so
actually that in
one
order to
must create the market.
in order to catch it, you've got to basically go through an area where mice live and snort up their droppings like cocaine. It's quite hard to catch, but there's a wide range of these create the demand and then supply the solution problem solution kind of crisis. And there's a lot of really pernicious stuff happening in animals as well. Like there's been an mRNA shot that pigs around the world have been getting. Who knew that? So you're eating this with no information about it. There's also quite a sinister thing where private equity firms are buying up vet clinics and they're supplying vaccines that are making pets sick. So, people are talking about these huge vet bills, their pooches are getting cancer. And there's also, I mean, there's more speculative material that, there's shedding in humans. There's shedding from pets as well from this. So it's one of those things that really bears watching. I don't know if you were going to carry on about the hantavirus, but the other thing I've been keeping a good eye on is this alpha-gal syndrome that's spread with the Lone Star tick. Because again, you've got this eerie coincidence of the Gates Foundation having worked on genetically modifying mosquitoes and ticks to spread vaccines, which is, muddle-headed. And the US Defense Department looked at, they created Lyme's disease apparently by trying to put syphilis in a tick. It's like a soft nuclear bomb. It's very inexpensive. You can drop it on a population, demoralize and thin it out, and it leaves everything standing. So, in terms of the effect that would have on New Zealand's meat exports, if that really took hold, and there's quite, it's spreading and saying, oh, it's climate change, but it basically works. I'll include links in the show notes, but it's of course there's a clip of this creepy little guy talking to the WEF, Dr. Matthew Lau, explored speculative ideas about human engineering to address climate change, including reducing meat consumption. Liao mentioned the Lone Star tick's possible role in engineering humanity by causing red meat allergies, heralding the possibility as an example of how biology can influence dietary habits. And alpha-gal syndrome recently made the Jimmy Dawson show. He shares that Bill Gates, who regularly partnered with USAID and who is a prominent globalist who wants the world's population to be reduced, funded research into genetically engineered cattle. Suddenly people have meat allergies. Fact checkers are frantically debunking this by stating only the Lone Star tick transmits it. But here's the deal. AGS is relatively new. Scientists don't have a clue what and how many ticks can transmit it. Gates is also behind the manufacture of GM mosquitoes that have been released, creating hybrid wild mosquitoes. So there's, again, it's horrible to contemplate because it's so easy to do, and you never know what's nonsense. There's videos of a farmer coming across a box crawling with ticks. Who knows? You can get AI faking stuff, so you got to be careful, but
Yeah, but also too, in terms of stuff like that, when I was in South Australia, one of the stories, because I actually watched quite a bit of news while I was there. Our friend who stayed with, he's a real news junkie and had a few channels going. But I found it quite refreshing, actually, looking at the Australian news coverage and not actually feeling my sort of uh, gut sort of
Gaslit.
bile vomit gastric reflux reaction in doing so. Anywho, plagues of mice have been absolutely befouling a number of farms across certain areas in Australia at the moment. And of course, hantavirus is a rodent borne disease. So of course that they could easily draw that connection and stoke the fear up. But again, I also saw a story this week around the concerns and delays, and it was actually breaking down where people sat on the gene technology bill. I mean, this just is further reason why we shouldn't be messing with this stuff here in this country. You know, we do not want to be going down this pathway and giving people that internationally already have very easy free reign even more free reign to come into New Zealand and experiment in this lovely little quarantine
Yeah, well,
selection
the
of
freest in the
islands,
world,
which are
right?
high technology and seem to have a population that go, oh, yes, bring this down here. Oh, yes, look at all those technology dollars. Isn't it wonderful? Make Frankenvirus. Great. You know, because that's what it feels like to
Well,
me.
yeah, and again, so scientists have lost the cachet that they once had, lost the social capital where you'll just accept what they say because they're scientists. They didn't cover themselves in glory during COVID. I think people are gradually waking up that the climate hysteria has been a very expensive folly, although our leaders still laser focused on it.
And laser focus on
But
climate change.
I
Yes.
mean, yeah, I'm really concerned about a lot of this, just the mad scientist stuff. I mean, there were two ethicists, Western Michigan University professors Parker Crutchfield and Blake Harris. They sound like villains in a novel, don't they? Published their proposal entitled Beneficial Blood Sucking in the October 2025 issue of the journal Bioethics. And they said, herein we argue that if eating meat is morally impermissible, then efforts to prevent the spread of tick-borne AGS are also morally impermissible. So
Mm.
you're dealing again. I mean, you can say, well, it's market forces or it's some intellectual folly. It's often the Occam's razor thing is it's kind of
Mm.
evil, thinking, well, we're going to, without their consent, give people a disease that's going to force them to change their ability to digest a food that we all enjoy. Not all of us,
Yeah.
but I do.
No. Well, yes, yes, so do I. So do I. It's definitely food for thought. And as you said, you're going to supply those links to our wonderful Ginger, who will put them in the show notes for everybody to take a look at. Hey, now look, speaking of rats and kitchens, did you see the look on Chris Hipkins's face when he got asked about a certain troll account on social media called Luxury Marmite Sandwich around whether or not, you know, it was Toastergate, wasn't it? It was all about the toaster. The toaster looked very familiar. And of course, Christopher was like, I don't know what you're talking about. You know, I haven't seen this toaster before. What is this toaster you speak of? Turns out the account, it was an ex-Labor staffer. Oops.
There's so many of them. I mean, if you're on social media, you see just these relentless, muddle-headed comments, and if you challenge them, that there's never an argument. It's just a blah blah blah, and I mean that's what they do. You know, it's how they herd people into their little way of thinking, and it's pernicious. And I was using that word a lot today. But if you reply back Labor staffer vibes, very often they stop.
I just, one, I'm pleased that the media did report it and it had a certain amount of gravitas around it, which is great. But I have to say, I mean, how many issues and I won't use the word scandal because I don't think that this is a scandal. I just think that this is one of those, hey, this is a deployment of those that tend to support your political party, and I'm sure the Greens and Te Pāti Māori are full of them as well, and also too, so are ACT, and everybody has them. They have those really hyper aware, hyper fans, so then they will go out and, troll away. But I mean, gosh, they've been very thin on policy, Labor, and every single time you see it's another thing, another little grubby stain on the leadership of Chris Hipkins, and yet he's still there.
It's those
It's
eyebrows.
like mold.
It's those eyebrows.
Mold in a corner of a room.
His eyebrows are a dog whistle. They talk to the devouring mother Labor ladies. Oh, he's just a little boy. He didn't mean it. Sort of stimulates their maternal responses. It says to the weak, resentful Machiavellian men, oh, he's one of well played, sir. And it signals to ethno-nationalist Māori, here's someone I can use like a howdy-doody puppet to do what I want. So, it's amazing. As I've said, those eyebrows are 60% of his political success. And he gets away. Yeah. He gets away with stuff that he's like the post-nuclear rat, isn't he? Just survives.
I know. It's really quite incredible. But speaking of sort of super ethno-nationalistic Māori, there's been a lot going on in that political space this week. I mean, Maree Kappakingi has decided to go out on her own and do something super original. So, oh my God, I'm amazed that she hasn't thought of this before and started a new political party because we so needed another new one called Te Tai Tokerau. So people obviously couldn't get confused because that's the seat in which she stands, bless her heart. There was also rumours, would she, wouldn't she, Oreni Kaipara, who is in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, would she jump, wouldn't she jump? And then, of course, you've got Deb and Dave running around like the muddle-headed idiots they are, doing their Deb and Dave act. I mean, the performative nature is mildly entertaining. Meanwhile, big... Kai whakahaere, Papa Hone. Oh, yeah. John Tamahere, huge big article, deep dive piece in the Herald around the ongoing concerns about, the movement of money and loans and the like, which he has vigorously denied. And yet, that smell just doesn't quite go away, does it?
I'll say this for Mrs. Kappakingi's initiative of starting the Te Tai Tokerau party. I think in a lot of ways it's the way forward. It is a regional political party. I think I would much rather vote for a political party that is, say, well, in my case it would be the whether it's Papamoa East or Bay of Plenty East, where someone's saying, well, these are the policies that are going to affect you that we're going to take down and champion in Wellington, rather than having politicians who are run on puppet strings from Wellington, rolling turds and glitter and selling them to us because that's all there is. So I think it's got legs, and the party political system is a failure, isn't it? We get these leaders, and you think, who wanted that guy? And that's been the case, for the last few leaders. It's the solution that no one asked for.
That's very generous of you to say that. And if anyone can pull it off, it's in a Māori seat that you can do it, because they are so unbelievably volatile from a voter perspective. Māori voters within those electorates do have a tendency to follow whatever the new shiny thing is.
They're pretty savvy. Māori voters are a bit more switched on tactically. Generally.
Yeah, but that's what I mean, though. I mean, we saw it in the last election this would be a classic case in point, where they gave their candidate votes to Te Pāti Māori and got 6 out of 7 across the line. But then, overwhelmingly, their party vote went to Labor. Very savvy, very savvy. But they also, too, will, New Zealand First has done very, very well historically off the back of the Māori seat votes. To be brutally honest with you, we have representation in Parliament. I mean, I for a long time, I kind of was a bit ambivalent on the Māori seats. I kind of thought, well, Māori can only vote once. But it's that proportionality. You don't have it within the Māori seats because most Māori aren't on the Māori seat, aren't on the Māori roll. They're in the general roll.
Mm.
So the reality of it is what you're then doing is creating this hyper environment for those who are very politically charged to actually, I mean, they say to Winston that he is often the tail that wags a dog whenever he's in coalition, but so are that Māori representation because they represent a small proportion of a slightly larger but still minority group and have a tremendous amount of influence and sway. I do believe I mean, if she can pull it off, if Marameno can pull it off, great. And it has, Te Tai Tokoro has a history. Look at the Manapati with Hone Harawira. Been there, done
Mm.
that, got the T-shirt, it can happen. But yeah, it's at least there's some dynamism going on in
Well,
politics on that side of the fence, I have to say.
once you
But yeah.
turn your back on universalism, and I mean, not everyone agrees with this, but it seems obvious, and I think history bears this out. The Treaty of Waitangi was about universalism. It was saying, hey, we're all equal under the law, and we've all, it was an attempt to establish a high trust society, and that's why Māori liked it. Because if you've got a bit of land and you no longer have to worry about the neighbouring tribe coming over the hill and killing you and taking your stuff, then you can spend more time developing that land than you're spending building palisades and focusing on how to address that and lying awake at night, presumably, thinking about it. The Maori ethno-nationalist movement, the separatist movement, goes against that. It lowers trust. And of course, now we're being hosed down by this immigration that's hyper clannish as well. There are a lot of those people we're bringing in form their own communities and preferentially hire within them. So it's a significant thing to reduce trust in society and eliminate that universalism. And of course, Māori separatism will only survive as long as white folks stick with the idea of universalism. As soon as we go, oh, okay, well, I guess we better circle our wagons and look after our own interests. It'll be, oh, no, we didn't mean that.
Mm. Well, yes, indeed. Indeed. Hey, you mentioned muddle-headed thinking before. You sent me a blog post from Carl Frayne, which I enjoyed. He was down in Featherston at a Writers' Festival. At a Writers' Festival in Featherston. Could you imagine? I would safe to say that not a lot of ACT voters potentially could have attended such an event. Anywho, he was down at this event and it was the usual, he said, collection of panels and discussions. Some banal, some not so much. But one of the discussions that he was on was Trevor Mallard was there, the retired, brought home, extracted out of, removed from the heart of the Dublin breast by Winston, ambassador to Ireland, and of course, who can forget anybody that was in Wellington in early 2022? He was the Speaker of the House in the Jacinda Ardern government, and he is now retired. Now, there were two articles that dropped this week. One was the Carl Frayne blog. The other was in spin-off from Toby Manhire, because he was at the event as well. Toby's take on Trevor being there, like, oh, shocker, his Home Alone moment, was that Trevor admitted in a panel that in 2017, Labor hadn't really done the preparation and they weren't prepared to go in government. And when Winston gave them the nod, they sort of jumped in and gave Winston too much power. And that's sort of, why things were a little bit difficult and fractious during 2017. Tell us something we don't know. Meanwhile, what did Carl Frayne have to say, Marty?
Well, he was surprised to hear Trevor Mallard say that the parliamentary protests were funded by Russia. apparently. Who knew?
Who knew?
For his part, Mallard, having been Speaker during the anti-vax occupation of Parliament's grounds, was plainly concerned with putting a favourable spin on his involvement in that unprecedented brouhaha. That's your word. He told the audience that a lot of marginal people were involved in the protest camp, people who had gone down rabbit holes, including mentally ill individuals he knew from his Hutt South electorate. In other words, nutcases and no-hopers. I wonder if anyone else in the hall felt, as I did, that this was a less than empathetic way for a Labour MP, one who makes much of the fact that he represented the battlers from working class Wainuiamata, to brush aside the concerns of people who are social casualties. Henry Cook pointed out that many of the protesters had lost their jobs because of vaccination mandates, and Te Aniwa Hoodie Hanganui acknowledged, that they were a real mix of people. Sorry, I thought this was there, but it wasn't. The big surprise. Oh, he also criticised the police for taking too long to deal with the protest encampment. Oh, so it was their fault, he paraphrased, to paraphrase Basil Fawlty. He defended the use of water sprinklers, which were seen along with the notorious Mallard-instigated Barry Manilow broadcast as an attempt to dislodge the occupants, as being necessary to wash away human waste. That was a new one on me, and I wondered whether it was a convenient justification post-event. Gosh, I don't like that. I don't care for that guy.
Trevor Mallard,
The
no.
big surprise, one that even had the stranger next to me turning to me with a look of disbelief, was Mallard's claim that the protest camp was funded by Russia. Yep, that's right. Mallard reckoned someone paid for millions of dollars, yes, millions, worth of camping equipment that mysteriously turned up in Parliament's grounds. Protesters suddenly had money to spend, and he had no doubt that money came from offshore. Russia, he said.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow. Coming from, anybody that was anywhere near Wellington or followed Wellington knows exactly what a bully Trevor was. Go Bucke. Anyway, so rich, coming from a man who was in a government that funded and supported the disinformation project, irony much, plays the Russia card. He talks about, I think his justification, wasn't it somewhere that he saw Canadian flags in the crowd, and therefore he'd heard of a Russia link with the Canadian truckers, so therefore why were the Canadian flags there? It must be Russia. That was the solution. He obviously, Trev, mate, you're retired now, so I know you've got time.
And you're looking a bit sick.
Yeah, here you go, Trev. If you're wanting to actually, read this, Tiger. Read this, because this will tell you, no Russian money, darling. It will tell you that this was everyday New Zealanders, that, they said everyday New Zealanders that were marginalised, that came together in a movement, pulled together, got donations, other Kiwis got behind them, got support. This is what is lovingly known in your left-wing circles, sweetie, as a grassroots movement.
Well,
That's what it is.
The other thing
Read
that's
it.
worth considering, Maree, is Trevor Loudon in one of your recent interviews said that the reason that New Zealand got its nuclear-free policy, and the reason that the unions were comparatively silent during all of the privatisation that affected a lot of workers within New Zealand, rightly or wrongly, was that the communist wing of the Labour Party did a deal with Moscow where they delivered nuclear-free policies in exchange for the right wing of the Labour Party being able to do their economic reforms. So Mallard was donkey deep in that back in 1984 or 1987. And so he'd know all about deals with Russia.
Yeah, and that book is God's Own Enemies by Trevor Loudon, and he actually opens the book with the Kiwis. He had interviewed one that was involved in the trade union movement that went across, were part of a workshop in Moscow, and from that meeting, the seeds of the nuclear-free movement were planted. Yeah, direct links, all referenced, everything there. It's fascinating. And, Mallard is a great example of just so many within that Labour ilk, because he ran through, the book itself ran through all the Labour MPs at that time, particularly through to the end of 23, who were in Parliament, and just where they were, the influence of the Fabian Society in New Zealand, the influence of the Cuban influence within New Zealand. I mean, we have a love affair with Cuba, particularly within Labour politicians, that really, if for any observer, is quite unhealthy.
It's a very busy embassy,
It's all
apparently, isn't
there.
it? The Cuban embassy. And of course, the Greens are very,
Very
very heavily
lots.
linked to Cuba.
Look, they obviously have a penchant for white rum, is all I have to say, Labour politicians, because they spend a lot of time there. A lot of time there, yeah. I just thought both of those were amazing. But just, looking at the spin-off, Toby Manhire, that for him was the big clanger for Mallard. They were disorganised in 2017 and Winston was given too much power. You talk about miss the lead as it came trampling past you like a herd of elephants, but there you go.
Yeah, we weren't prepared to go into government, and so we offered Winston Peters, or New Zealand First, everything they asked for. So we had some policy. And then,
Insane.
And I think it's worth, in this election year, repeating that New Zealand First, and I know sometimes we get accused of being too pro-New Zealand First, but I think we're generally patriotic Kiwis, and they best represent, in rhetoric anyway, that bearing. But things are decided very democratically. It's a very democratic party. And the story that Cam Slater relayed before the last election was that when they went in to talk to Bill English, he said, well, they're trying to roll me. And they just laughed when they asked for anything. So they weren't going to give them anything. They signalled that they were unstable. They went to see Labour and they said, we'll give you whatever you want. They went back to their membership, and their membership went, well, let's go with the side that'll give us anything we want. And that first iteration of that particular Labour-led government was considerably better than what came after it once they had a majority.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, right. Now, the next story I want to go on to is one that's actually created a little bit of a stir even on our own RCR social media, because it was the Clown World piece this morning, and or was it yesterday, this morning, that went up on socials, and I know I've had a bit of interaction around it. It is one about a new cafe. It's about to be opened in Rotorua at the end of July. They've obviously had their PR machine started, and the cafe is called Rumaki. It's going to be opened in Fenton Street, and if anyone knows Rotorua, Fenton Street is the main drag where all the motels and everything that's happening is going on. And this cafe has a point of difference, and this is reading from their own website. What is Rumaki? Rumaki is a cafe being established in Rotorua. While it will have great food and coffee, its main purpose is to normalise te reo Māori, being a total immersion space in the front and the back, staff, customers, everyone. From the time you walk through the doors, Māori is the only language you'll hear, no English. And then immediately after that is a donate now button. Now, this has created quite a stir, because people instantly look at this going, well, this is sort of privilege. However, on social media, there have been comments by people that I know and who are sort of like, well, I have no problem going in and using te reo if that's what they want to do, go for it. What are your initial thoughts on this, Marty? And I'll share some of the ideas and thoughts that I've had.
Oh, it doesn't it doesn't outrage me. There's always just without even doing any research, knowing that it's not standing on its own merits by offering a value proposition. The other thing is, the lady with very beautiful blue eyes and the Chin Moko, who says, this is Rumaki Cafe executive director Miraka Davies. I'm not sure what Miraka.
Oh, that'll be Melissa probably.
Yeah, it doesn't matter your culture if you don't know how to speak the language. If you want to experience it and you're willing to give it a go, we'll be here to support and help you to do it. Davies said she wasn't raised speaking te reo Māori, and that was a source of grief and distress for many within the culture. A lot of the most radical, outraged people within Māoridom are the ones who weren't raised and were maybe regarded by other Māori as being less than Māori. So they kind of overcompensate a little bit. Think about Joanna Forbes and some of
Debbie
those.
Ngāti Wapeka.
Yeah, the ones who get a bit sunburned and maybe don't do well at school and are teased by their fellows. And the thing that bothers me is the thing I was talking about earlier, which is that sort of idea of New Zealand balkanizing, that us and them thing that's being fostered, that I think is terribly unhelpful. And it's particularly unhelpful in children. Telling kids, but it's the old thing, anything bad that happens to you is someone else's fault, and you can't get ahead because of colonization. It's dreadful. But I mean, if go, fill your boots. If you want to have a Māori cafe,
Look,
go for it.
Yeah, and this is where I'm at too. Like I've had this to and fro conversation with it. What I am, and I think value proposition. You summed it up beautifully when you said value. You and I both have run businesses. It has been put out there as this wonderful, as a cafe. It's not a cafe. It's not a cafe. It is a virtue signaling
With cups.
proposition it's a charitable trust. Even again, this is from their website. Is this a business or a charitable trust? Both. Hasn't John Tamahiri getting into trouble over that? Anyway, both. A charity can run a business and make profits to fund its charitable purposes. During the establishment phase of the cafe, we're seeking donations and grants. They've got around 20K from the lotteries I see. Once the doors are open, Rumaki will be self-funded by the operations of the cafe. Now, this is where you were right, is in terms of the value proposition. I do struggle with ventures like this that will have a novelty value. Yes, if anywhere that you can make a te reo cafe work, Rotorua is certainly the place that you can do it, you will have a novelty value. But I don't think, in looking at the people that run it, many of these have actually run a business like a cafe because A, they run thin on the ground in terms of profit margins. Two, it's all about throughput, baby. You need to get people through bums on seats and actually have a positive experience, good coffee, good food, good service, and all the rest. If you've got people that are going in, and they were talking about in the newspaper article, having some sort of system where they maybe had little waka paddles or something with different birds on them to show where you were at with your te reo in terms of so you can help them order a coffee and what have you. Well, that all takes time. If this cafe wants to make money, it needs to be busy. Well, if you're not a fluent speaker, and if you are a fluent speaker rather, and you want to whip in, whip out, have a quick coffee and do whatever, and you're having to stand there in line while Hank and Candy from Arkansas are standing there trying to order their 2 flat whites and te reo and struggling and making an absolute mince of it, and the staff are being told that not to speak English and under any circumstances. There is 1,000,001 reasons why this will struggle as a business.
Well,
it needs to, the fact that it's calling itself a business and being part of a trust is the problem. It needs to be open. This is essentially a full immersion school in a community run by a trust that happens to have a cafe. And what will end up happening is it will become a place and a hub for those who are fluent, and it will become like a little fluent te reo club. And all of a sudden, if you're not fluent to a certain level of competency, you're not going to feel welcome.
Actually,
You'll feel excluded.
When I think about it, I think miraka is Māori for milk, which is ironic. That's the cafe executive director's name. But I tell you what it jarred against for me was a news article where you had the chairperson of the owner of Mount Maunganui um, refusing to open, saying, "Oh, we've talked to our members and they all say no. You know, he needs to rehabilitate. You know, saying the maunga needs time to heal." And so you've got all these poor cafe and business owners down the base of it who obviously get a lot of traffic from people who are climbing the maunga. And they're just airily going, "No, the maunga needs time to heal." And it's I don't envy people in hospitality in New Zealand. There are a lot of them who are just hanging on the last fumes of optimism,
Mm,
or basically a sunk cost fallacy, where they just don't want to give up and they're just praying that things are going to come right. But there's a lot of that passive aggression where we're just going to slow things down. Just as Rawiri Waititi said, our role is to be a stone in your shoe. It's kind of like, oh,
mm,
good. That's a high aspiration, isn't it? So, yeah, go for it. Have your cafe. You know, if you've got some trusts or charities that are going to put the money in because you can't put a value proposition together that actually allows you to stay afloat through people coming in and buying coffee, who cares? On the scale of things, it's pretty low. But yeah, there's that asymmetric concern.
mm.
And I thought the airy dismissal of these very real problems that these business owners at the base of the mountain, including Mayor Mahi Drysdale, said, "Oh, well, we're not an insurer." And, you know, the cafe owners were arguing, "Well, you cocked it up, so that's why we're unable to open." And so, yeah, they're being kind of hung out to dry a little bit. So those two things as a contrast are kind of a bit of a commentary.
Yeah. Oh, look, for me, I just have an issue with anything that is a value signal trying to be wrapped up as an educational and or experience proposition that has been primarily seeded and funded by other people.
Yeah, here we
Now,
are.
I mean, that's just me. If they make a go of it and it becomes something really fantastic, look, I'll eat my words and be like, good on them. But I just, I struggle when, Mikata says things like, if you come in and
Yeah,
you take a telephone call and you're it's in English, you'll be asked to move outside. I'm sorry, that smacks of very papers, please to me. We've lived through that level of exclusion. And I even actually looked up workplace discrimination. In New Zealand, you cannot refuse to employ someone simply because they do not speak English or any other specific language, unless that language proficiency is a genuine necessary requirement for the safe and effective performance of the job. Now, they are looking for fluent te reo speakers for employment in this cafe. Now, I don't see how that is safe and effective. So they're obviously skating a very fine line, and it just grates me. It just grates me that ultimately what they say they intend this to be and what it will most likely turn out to be are two completely different things. And people are fawning all over it saying, oh, this is really wonderful and isn't this nice? Okay, fine, give it a go. But to me, it just screams, I just see virtue signal, virtue signal, virtue signal, and an opportunity for exclusion of anybody that even goes in there,
yeah.
that
That's
even just tries to.
dead
That's what
dead
I have a
right.
problem
I
with.
mean, I've made a couple of attempts to learn te reo. One, I registered with a provider. This is when I was living in Gisborne, and they didn't get back to me and messed around, and I missed the start, and so I sort of canned that. And then I downloaded an app, and what frustrated me was that it was mostly pidgin English. So, people would be going into this cafe and ordering a cup of tea, and that's kind of like, oh. And the when I've had Māori teach me Māori, there's a couple of things. Firstly, the etymology of the words is fascinating. I've mentioned before, I had the great privilege to sit down with Dr. Rose Pere before I went around Lake Waikaremoana as part of an article I wrote for the Gisborne Herald on the trip, and she explained the history of it, some quite freaky stuff, that she believed about it. And but just with her breaking down the etymology of various
Mm.
words, it was fascinating. And I think the beauty of the language is diluted just by the soup of these pidgin English words, where it's expanded the number of words out by a factor of 10, I think.
And, yeah,
And so,
and the rest. It's,
yeah,
I had this conversation with Dilandy, exactly to your point,
mm,
and she was saying, like, particularly around the gender space, and it's expanded so rapidly that traditional te reo speakers that learnt as children,
yeah.
who are now,
And the
of an age,
dialects,
boomers.
it's been standardized. Yeah, but the point, central point for me with that was, they're saying, oh, if you're going to not speak Māori, you're going to
Mm,
get booted out. It's the antithesis of my experience having Māori people teach me Māori words. They're so generous, they're so thorough,
mm,
and they really bring it alive and make it a thing of beauty. Whereas, and now I've got fatigue.
yeah,
I've lost interest in it because it's a bit like tā moko, it's become a badge of separatism. It's become a tribal thing that by implication hates the other, as tribal societies do,
mm,
which is a shame, because again it goes against the Treaty of Waitangi, which seeks to make a high trust society where we are all the same but free to be ourselves and form groups within that, but on the understanding that we all have the same standard of citizenship.
yeah. Look, I just can't help but feeling that the outcome will be the complete opposite of the intention that has been vocalized by them. I
If I'm
just
in Rotorua, I'll go and I'll have a
check it
cup of tea
out. The have a cup of tea,
with
exactly.
miraka
Uh, Now,
and
what
hoka.
else have you got before I jump into, and before we sort of, I've got one more thing that I want to talk about off the bites, but I know you did some reading that I didn't do, so let's just dive in there first before we head over to some matters RCR.
Yeah, well, I had a read of Richard Preble's, and it was from a week ago, but it echoes my thoughts. He was talking about how Robert Muldoon was a master campaigner, and he said he set the agenda, and whoever dictates the agenda usually wins. Neither of the major parties has set an agenda, and that is so true. It's you almost feel like they're softening us up to form a coalition.
Oh, a grand coalition.
So he's saying growth is not an agenda. Being policy
Hmm.
light is the opposite of an agenda. That's a dig at Chris Hipkins, of course. Yet the defining issue of this election is obvious: energy. We are taught our wealth comes from grass turned into milk and meat. That's only half the story. New Zealand became prosperous on the back of cheap, abundant electricity. Um, Cheap power drove exports, industry, and wages. It underwrote our standard of living. And that's something that, and I mean, I had a look at a few other stories, but I made a point of looking up the backgrounds of the journalists, all ladies with BAs. The lack of diversity within the media intellectually is of far more concern to me than the racial diversity. But he's so there's that basic failure to understand, firstly, how the cost of energy is a major determinant of not only the prosperity of a nation, but also the quality of living for ordinary New Zealanders. So he's dead right in that National really could lean into that. But he's talking about how the last Labor government really pulled the rug out from under the New Zealand economy with the captain's call, where Comrade Cindy had to go to Paris and give a speech. And so she, on the spur of the moment, said, we're going to ban gas and oil exploration in New Zealand. So, we are in an energy crisis in part because Labor made the most consequential energy decision of this century when it banned offshore exploration. without consulting voters, the then government dismantled the second half of our energy equation. So we've got hydro, but you need gas to balance it for dry years, without a plan to replace it. The result has been predictable: higher prices, greater risk of shortages, more coal in dry years, and a steady erosion of our competitive advantage. Labor and Greens refuse to admit the mistake. They're promising to do it again, reimposing the exploration ban and locking in scarcity. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon acknowledges the shortages and has repealed the offshore exploration ban. That is necessary but not enough. So he's saying Muldoon would have seized on this issue. He would have forced the country to choose. He would have not left voters in any doubt what was at stake. On the one side, a future of abundant, reliable, affordable energy, the foundation of high wages, competitive exports, and raising living standards. On the other hand, the future of managed scarcity, constrained supply, higher prices, and declining competitiveness. Households are paying more, businesses are investing less, growth slowing. I think he's spot on. I think that
Yeah.
we should be more concerned about that. We should go nuclear. We should
Yeah.
pull back all those Fabian socialist boomers, treason with Russia all those years ago, promising to make New Zealand nuclear free. I think you can buy a gigawatt of nuclear generation for about $1 billion, and it would take 40 to completely supply New Zealand with energy.
Well, look, I'll even go sort of actually roll things back in the opposite direction. It was something that Lester Bryant said on one of the webinars that we did, coal. He said, we've got some of the best coal in the world. We've got plenty of it. And the entire developing world is run on the stuff. And here we are selling it and buying in a dirty international equivalent. Why aren't we using our own coal to power our own destiny, to create our own energy? And I have to admit, I think he's dead right on
Was
that.
it the Haber-Farr process, the one that was pioneered in Germany during the war to turn coal into diesel? We must have our own supply of diesel, because otherwise we're vulnerable to global shocks in a way that could cripple our whole country. And without being overly dramatic, it could cause starvation. It would certainly cause a lot of our industry to grind to a halt in a way that would be very, very difficult to restart. And again, it's whether or not there's anyone who is going to muster the political will that's going to, I guess, de-brainwash people into understanding the importance of cheap, reliable energy. Everyone's bought into this anti-human philosophy that humans are a plague on the face of the earth and our use of energy's killing the planet. If we become sufficiently prosperous to think about really restoring the environment, New Zealand could be a very, very different country.
Yeah, indeed. And, the Preble's right. There are those that have been very lacking on policy. I think the fact that here we are, barely 6 months out from an election, and we've hardly seen anything consequential at all from Labor other than the usual suspects. And a number of other parties have been, getting policy lined up. So I think we're going to get a whole bunch at the same time, and they're just going to hope. I think Labor are sitting here hoping that by saying nothing, they're just going to see that their numbers rise in the polls. But who knows? Hey, now look, I'm wanting to divert actually for a few things that have been cropping up. If you've been paying attention on the website and or in your inboxes for the Bites news, firstly, we this week, Hoodie, Graham Hood, launched his new show here on RCR for Mondays. It goes out on a Monday called Under the Hood. Do definitely listen to that. He talked about where, actually a topic, Marty, that you will resonate with you in terms of resilience. Where have the men gone? Where is the responsibility in terms of families? And I watched his initial pod. It was great. And then the very next morning, I saw the Whangarei police put out a video of a guy who was fleeing in central Whangarei, and there was this brilliant rugby tackle. I don't know whether you saw this. This guy in the street obviously saw this. Down went the
Run it
shoulder and
straight.
off into the rubbish bin. Beautiful. And it just, the two things tying together for me were just this wonderful synergy. So good to see that. Good on you. If you're a listener, an RCR listener out there in Whangarei, even though the police don't want to encourage that sort of behaviour, they were very thankful that Yeah, help. I thought it was brilliant. And do check out Hoodie's new podcast, as I said, on Under the Hood on a Monday. And lastly, the other thing that I want to talk about before we jump into feedback is that we've been doing, I don't know whether you've been aware, and if you get the Bites news, and if you're not getting the Bites news, where are you? Biteme.news. So
Fantastic.
sign up, bite me. Got to be doing it. We had the Curia poll question this month that we had them ask on our behalf was on independent media. And so New Zealand is split on trust in independent versus mainstream media. Kiwis are now evenly divided on where they place their trust in news, with the country split almost exactly down the middle. A new Curia poll for RCR shows that 51% of respondents agree they trust independent and alternative media more than mainstream media, while 49% disagree. The result points to a shift that is not simply about declining trust in traditional outlets, but a growing divide in where people turn for information. A clear gender gap is evident. Oh, Marty, there you go. Among men, 58% agree they trust independent media more than mainstream sources, compared to 44% of women. And obviously women with BAs, they tend to like to go there. Women are more likely to disagree, indicating a stronger preference for the mainstream outlets. Trust also varies strongly among political lines. ACT voters, 67% agree they trust independent media more than mainstream. That compares to 59% for National and 54% of New Zealand First. Support is lower among the left-leaning voters. Shocker! Just 44% of Labour voters agree, dropping to 37% for Te Pāti Māori and 36% for the Greens. Thoughts on that, Marty?
Well, it reflects the predisposition of journalists to be extremely more government, less freedom. And so it's no surprise that people who want more government and less freedom think that mainstream media is just fine. They're useful idiots without being but I think I hope that we can get more and more people tuning into RCR. We're going to do our best on Media Matters to be more and more professional and say and and a lot less. And we're not going to talk about some of the more fringy things so much. But I think we're making great content, and I think a lot of the people who maybe don't trust, if we call RCR alternative media, which I guess it certainly is, it's because they've never listened to it. And so share. If you can share something that resonates with you, so much the better. I see a clip that we did has 80,000 views, which was quite something. And I guess when people just hear, we're ordinary Kiwis who are concerned about things affecting ordinary Kiwi families, and those concerns aren't necessarily shared by the people who own corporations that do the advertising in mainstream media. You're not the customer of mainstream media. The corporations who advertise in it are. Whereas for our listeners, you are the customer. You are a customer. You keep us afloat through Foundation Members Club, and we thank you for it.
Yeah, we certainly do. And hand on heart, I do not have a BA or an arts degree. I am just a very crabby, gobby mother who reads far too much. We've had some great feedback this week, so thank you to everyone that sent feedback through. 2057 is the text, inbox at rcr.media is the email. Hi, Maree and Marty. Just love your Media Matters Weekly. Thank you. I was listening to your discussion regarding corporations. The government is the biggest corporations. Regards, Veronica. Yes, and that was also in reference to the way I look at it. And actually, I think there's another treaty settlement going on today down in Wellington. But one of the ways I look at a number of iwis isn't actually as trusts or incorporations. They are corporations. They are businesses now, particularly with the treaty settlement system. Oh, sorry, just skipped one. Great session this week, Maree and Marty. They are always good, but this was really interesting with some excellent data thrown in. I enjoyed it so much I had to listen again. While some of it could be depressing, you tossed in enough positivity and solutions that by the end, I just had a really good listen. From Sally. Thanks,
Nice.
Sally.
And I hope that
Yeah,
this
we
is even
do.
cheerier. I feel a lot cheerier this week than I did last week. I think you do too, although you've got a cold.
Yes, definitely.
Sun's rising on my
This one
beard
is.
and my nose, I see.
Hey, good to see you farting, Marty, it says. Great minds do seem to think alike.
Fasting.
It must be
Fasting, Maree, not farting.
fa- fasting.
Thank you.
See, you say fasting, I hear starving. Just saying. Great minds seem to think alike. It must be the Matawai connection, lol. No, mate, because as I said, fasting, starving, and I lived there longer. Maree is pretty cool too, though I never met her. Oh, thank you, Peter. You get the fossil fuel thing, which is great. More Asian babies born in New Zealand than Kiwis now. You help to keep my positive. I'm a bit of a doomer. Great show, Marty. Stay cool, from Peter. No doom, Pete. You need to stay positive, my friend. Thank you
Thanks,
for
Pete.
writing in. Great talk with, it's more from Peter. A great talk with Marty. I lived in Matawai too. It seems we are all on the same page. Your talk echoed an email I sent to Marcia recently. Even the fasting, I did a 7 days recently. Yeah, starving.
It's a long 7 days, Maree. But, it gets easier. By the 7th day, I could have carried on. But, man, the first 3 days are a challenge.
Oh, that's your lips moving. Right, okay. Yeah, no. Hey there, dear Maree. Libby here from Northland. Oh, I'm glad you've written, Libby. I have to disagree with your comments about Media Matters about marriage. When you said that marriage is an institution and that it keeps families together, I'm paraphrasing, but I think that was the general gist of your discussion. The very fact that it is an institution is what put me and my partner off marrying. We remained together for just over 20 years until his death, raised 3 beautiful children, and never married in the eyes of the system, partly because we were against said system and because neither of us at that time were particularly religious. However, we still created an amazing family. So while I see your comments were perhaps aimed at others, and I dare say it, those who have babies for wealthy cash, very un-PC of me, but I see it daily in and out of my job. Be careful not to generalise too much, as a little piece of paper saying you're married in the eyes of the law is not what some of us consider commitment. Love always, Libby. Super fair comment, Libby. And the biggest thing for me in terms of marriage is the one is around protections of children. Whilst if you don't have children, there's a lot in terms of property and all the rest of it, there are protections outside of marriage. But with children, there is protections there, but I totally agree.
Yep.
It's not for everybody.
Committed,
And
monogamous, heterosexual relationships are primarily for the
yes,
benefit of children.
yeah. And so it's, and I totally get it. And also on another thing, Libby, thank you. Thank you. And hopefully you get something in the post replies from me. Libby sent me the most beautiful gift from her up there in Northland, and it was just wonderful. And I want to thank you for that. I've actually shared some of it with my very chili loving son. So he thanks you as well. And yeah, thank you for you, and also to all that beautiful work and put in by your late partner, because I know that a lot of it was his brainchild there as well. So I do appreciate that. But yes, no, and I love it. I love the fact that, and you're right, because it is, and also too, I think there are people as well that, marriage doesn't need, a marriage contract can be something that is done between two people. And many years ago, the state were not involved. There were no licenses. You didn't have to register it anywhere. It was actually a contract between two people. So that contract may be an informal contract, which is just as binding as a marriage. For me, I just look at it from a legal perspective. And having done both, I have done both in terms of, with and without the contract, and still bear the economic scars. So I get it. Yeah. So, but thank you, Libby, for your letter. And look at this. Last but not least, post of the week. Post of the week. Oh, this is the one that you just referenced, Marty. It used to be if you went around and saw a truck and it looked like a cab, that one, the truck, 60 to 70% with Māori driving it. Now it's 60 to 70% Indian. You guys absolutely loved it. Over 80,000 impressions. And Facebook earned the most engagement this week. So as you said, Marty, thank you to everyone that shared that, because it's those sorts of things that help get the RCR message out there.
Good stuff, yeah. And there's a lot to do. We can still head off some. I mean, the issue with talking about media is that it's like staring out the window of a car and looking at what's going by. And you got to keep thinking about where you're going. And if you look at where we're going, where we're being hosed down by with people from other cultures who aren't assimilating, who are replacing the native population because we've been priced out of the property market before we have children, or when we're of the age to sorry, my computer wants to restart. To have children, there's all sorts of things you could do in a choose life way that would fix that. Killing off New Zealand's culture rather than reinvigorating it isn't choosing life.
Mm.
Um,
There you go. And on that note, you have an appointment to get to. I want to thank everybody for joining us today here with Media Matters. 2057 is the text, inbox at rcr.media is the email. And if you're not signed up to Byte News, byteme.news is the place you need to go and do that. Marty, thank you. We'll do it all
I'll see you.
again next week. Do appreciate your time today.
Thanks very much. Have a great week, everyone.